Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome to the Buchanan Area Senior Center. So happy that you are here, and we are very pleased to have our own Monroe here today. She is going to be talking to us about the art and challenges of caregiving. And you've already been talking with her prior to this presentation. She has a lot of information, stuff that she has personally learned on her own, taking care of her mother, as well as all the education that she learned and gained and did her information gathering.
Learn from people here.
So I'm going to hand this right off, but I do want to let you know, tomorrow we are offering another class here at the center. It is to help you to inform, we're all about informing people, so to inform and to educate you about gays and lesbians. That is a very tough topic to have, a hard conversation. But what we're finding out that a lot of the young folks, our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, they have this wonderful opportunity to be their authentic selves and to open themselves up and saying, you know, who they are. I am. And so we're very excited. We're going to have the Out Center here. Well, actually, it could be on Zoom. Unfortunately, it couldn't be live. But we're going to be having a Zoom with them. It will be live through the Zooming, so we can ask questions as well. They're going to educate us, and they're going to tell us about the pronouns and about some challenges and some of the wonderful programs that we have and everything. So we're very excited. Not here to change your mind or what you think is right or wrong, but you may have known somebody and you just want to get more educated on what their lives may be like. So that is tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Let me confirm everything. I have so many different things in my head planning for July. Yes, so yes,
you're always a month ahead of us.
Yes, and even 2 or 3 sometimes. But thank you again. Thank you so much, Kylie.
Thank you.
We
and I have to tell
it.
you look beautiful too.
Oh, what's up here?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all for coming. I'm hoping that with this we can, help each other kind of. You already know how to do this because you've done this before. I met you while you were taking care of your wife, right? And you did a beautiful, beautiful job. So I've learned from you. I learned from a little bit of everyone. I actually used to work here. I'm still involved by being on the board, so I can help make decisions that are good for our seniors. And I am now a caregiver for my mother full-time. In the last right before COVID, I also for 2 years was taking care of my sister who was terminally ill with cancer. She was closer to my age. So I've learned how to take care of somebody who's terminally ill, which is very different than taking care of a loved one or someone who's aging. I also had the opportunity before I came here to take care of a young teenager who had mental illness. So caretaking is something that is very, very different for each case, each person. Everyone ages differently. So when people say to me, well, my mother doesn't have that at that age, I mean, she's much more, that is unfair to say because we're all very, very different. We all age differently, and there are stages to the aging and stages to caregiving. Those stages change all the time as we are caring for people, so we need to remember that and not pigeonhole someone into a box. Everyone is different. Each one of us is different in how we care. So let's begin. In my case, I find this to be an art, but I also find it to be extremely challenging at times, which requires you to almost become a magician, an artist, a creativity person, someone who never puts themselves first, but remembers that they have to care for themselves in order to be a good caregiver. It's hard to do because you don't always have that time. I will use an analogy that I really, really like because I remember fighting with that analogy and thinking it was the dumbest thing I ever heard. But then I practiced it, and that is when you go on a plane and they tell you that if there is a problem and the masks come down, you put the mask on yourself first before you attend to your child or to the person next to you. And I thought, well, that's stupid. I want to take care of the person next to me. However, you can't do that unless you are well taken care of. So if you are solid on your 2 feet, they will be solid on their 2 feet. So it's very important to remember that we don't come first when we're caring for them, but we're just as important, and we have to take care of ourselves when we're not with them. If you are with a caregiver, if you're the caregiver that's with somebody 24/7, make sure that you have an outlet. You have someone you can call to verbalize what you're going through. Get a therapist if you can, because therapy is not so much a negative thing, it becomes a counselor. It is someone who helps you and understands the psychology of the person that you're caring for and your own psychology. So that to me is key of taking care of yourself, is making sure that your mental state is solid, okay? So how does this work? Okay, here's another thing that I have to tell you. I realized, being that I'm so busy all the time, that I thought this was next week. You lose sense of time, okay? You do lose sense of time when you're taking care of people. You lose the dates, you lose the time. So with that said, all of a sudden I thought, oh my God, I'm not ready for tomorrow. So you have to elaborate, you have to be creative, you have to find ways where you prioritize things, and you have to be flexible to change moments. So what I did was, instead of not having the time to type everything in, I decided to do it in handwriting. I took photos of everything with my phone, and then I just put the PowerPoint together this morning. So these are things that we need to learn, and that's what I mean about don't box yourself in. You can make a list of things to do, but don't expect to finish them in that particular order, because something's going to come up. And if you're the type of person that can't be flexible, you're going to find it even more challenging to take care of someone. Okay. Oops. Went back too fast. Okay. So we said art is about creativity, the art part of taking care of someone. It's about the passion of wanting to do this kind of work. And even people that, there are some people who actually go into this as a career and become nurses or become caregivers, but sometimes we are just pulled into it. And when we're pulled into it, it is important to have passion for it. So if you don't have passion for the idea of caring or giving, have passion for the person that you're doing it for. We have to have acceptance, which is it's key. Accepting the person for who they are. They could be your spouse, and you're used to them being the one that cooks in the house, that takes care of things. You have to accept them for who they are at that moment, because they will change as time goes by. Usually it takes a year before they change, then it becomes a day, then it becomes every moment. They can become a different person. And that's something that we have to learn how to accept them for what they are at that point. Faith is extremely important in this job because it really isn't a job. It is who we are, it is what we do. And if we think about it as a job you leave behind and you go home. This we don't leave behind. Even if we are only doing it for, let's say, a half a day, or if it's our career or our job, we still take it home with us. We think of these people when we lie down in bed. We have these thoughts of, did I do the right thing? How can I help them tomorrow? You begin to realize that they are on your mind all the time. God, I know some people don't like or don't feel comfortable with God. They may be angry at God. It doesn't have to be God if you don't want it to be. It can be a higher power. For me, if you've lost something in life, God, even if you didn't believe in God, He will come into your life, because it is the one strength that you have to go to. It is the one thing that you hold on to, and you know that you're not in control here. So if you have someone, even if you don't have that therapist or that counselor, ask for help. It will come to you. And a little bit of magic. It requires a tremendous amount of magic, and sometimes you don't even realize it's magic until it happened. All of a sudden, you're walking home or driving home, you're thinking, wow, I can't believe that just happened, that I was able to change her mind. And even though she kept saying no to the food, eventually she trusted me and she ate. So that's something, to me, that's magic. Caregiving has many different stages. Each requires a different part of you. And that is especially true when you're caring for a loved one or a family member, because it will require you to go into places that are not easy to go. With a parent, let's say that you had a parent that wasn't very good with you as a child. You may have even had a parent that was cruel and psychologically mean, but now it's your turn to take care of them. And you have to say to yourself, and it's not easy to do, I'm not the child anymore, and they're not my parent. This is a human being that I have to put everything aside for to care for it. That is not an easy thing to do, but it's required in order for us to be good at this, or to survive it. Now, caregiving is not for everyone, and we're not expecting everyone to be good at it and everyone to do it. But sometimes we're stuck with it and we're the only ones there. So what I would recommend is that truly think of it as a child or a pet. And some people say, how dare you compare my mother to a pet? Well, I'm sorry, but I love my pets. I'll do anything for my pets. So you just have to put love into it and realize, don't take it personally. Nothing that they are doing now, when they're being difficult, when they're being angry, when they're being defiant, they're not doing that to you. They are just reacting to a situation that they're in. So that is really important. Caregiving is not for everyone, like we just said, but everyone can do it. It requires a genuine application like anything else in life. So sometimes you have to make it very, very simple. Simplify it. If you get up in the morning, you brush your teeth, you comb your hair, you wash up before you go and have your coffee, that's the attitude you have to give for caregiving. It is just something you have to do, and it's part of who you are. It's part of your life. You may not like it, but this is where we are. It makes it a lot easier to be able to cope with it on a daily basis. And that is absolutely simplifying it, because there are days when you're going to want to rip your hair out. You really will. Now, what is caregiving? Caregiving can be an act of love. It can be a mission, which is where missionaries come from. They go into another country and they mission for people who are having a harder time. It is a purpose. For some of us, it is all we have. And when that person is deceased or passes away, all of a sudden you'll find out that we are completely confused. We are lost because our purpose is gone. And we have to repurpose our life again. So it is a purpose. For some, it's a calling. Not for everybody, but for some, it's a calling. I wouldn't say it's my calling. I would say I enjoy doing it. But if it were my calling, I would probably be doing this from day one, right after college. I would have started to do this. This is something that I feel comfortable doing. But I also have a very easy person to care for. When I was caring for another person, not my mother, like I am now, that person wasn't so easy. So you do, a calling, some people just have that. They just are caregivers, and that's all they know how to do. That's a gift. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, types of caregiving. You can caregive as a career. That's someone who chooses to do this, feel that they have a calling. Then there are some people that feel, I really want to do this. They go into doing it and realize, this is just not for me. And some people don't realize that. But because they put the time into it, because they're still paying their college bills for it, or their nursing bills, they stick to it. Those people need counseling as to how to do it. They need constant schooling, and that's okay. I think that everyone who works in a hospital or works in a living, like assisted living place, needs to go back and get training on a yearly basis. Just like police officers need training, just like nurses need training. It is something that they should do. For some of us, it's a choice. We made that choice. We knew when we were young, we would be the one in the family to take care of the elderly parent. For some, it's a request. Your father, before he dies, says to you, would you please promise me to take care of your parent, of my wife, your mom? That's a request. Then there's the third-party caregiving, which we don't have much control over, and that's when you take someone to an assisted living place. But there are those, like this young gentleman here, who, even though his wife was in an assisted, first she was home, then she needed more care, so she was in an assisted living. He was there every moment of the day with her.
Right.
Yeah, he just, instead of living in his home, he lived there and cared for her in the same way. So there are some of us that would just, we put our parents in an assisted living so that we can continue to have our lives. In some cases, it's not like that, and that's how it should be. It's easier sometimes to take a parent home and say, I'll just take care of them here. I don't want to go back and forth. But there comes a point in life or in their changing of where they are in their, in the aging, or depending on what they have, if they're ill, that you will not be able to give them what they need in your home. So you're better off. It's actually a kinder gesture to put them in a home, but to make sure that you're there so they see you on a daily basis. And then there is caregiving of a loved one, which I feel is probably the most challenging and the most difficult, because you have to change, and they change in front of your eyes. You almost can no longer look at them as that person that you knew, either the partner, the parent, the sister, even the child. They are now the subject of what you do. So it's very hard. You need to separate yourself. And separating yourself from love is really, really difficult. That is probably the toughest thing to do. And that's why it's so challenging. And because of the challenges, it is nice to be a creative person and to go to places like the Senior Center, take classes, so that you can learn different ways of doing it. Because you may be doing everything that is right, everything that is perfect, everything that you were taught to do that should be done, but it's not working. So everyone, you have to mold yourself to what works best for you.
Thank you. No, nothing. Thank you.
The subjects, which I said you start looking at them as a subject versus the family member, could be a child, it could be a stranger. It could be a spouse or partner. It could be an aging parent, terminally ill friend or relative, disabled, mentally ill, or challenged individual. All of these are things that we may have to take care of someday. That we may, we know that when a parent has a mentally challenged child and those parents pass away, you're left with that responsibility. I'm going to go back to the third one that says a spouse partner, because tomorrow's, like she said, tomorrow we're going to be having the LGBTQ program. I will tell you that there are a lot of people who, if they are gay and they're partners, when one spouse leaves or passes away, they get very nervous. And even though they were living out or outside of the closet and people knew that they were a gay couple, they sometimes decide to hide that once their spouse is gone. They no longer have the protection of that spouse or someone that is going to advocate for them when they get sick and have to go into a home or have to go into the hospital. They don't know how everyone's going to feel about them. And let me tell you, my sister, who I cared for with terminally ill cancer, was gay. And she had a wife, because in Michigan they had just gotten married before she got sick. And we would go into the hospital, and there were people that were some doctors were great about it, but then you'd get a nurse that had a problem with it, that was religious and felt that that was something that was sinful, and they wouldn't take care of her in the same way that another person would. So that is something that maybe for tomorrow, if you have a situation like that, definitely come tomorrow, because that will explain how to help someone in that situation, whether it be your child or a dear friend, whatever. Now, here's my question. We're going to have a couple questions, and you guys are welcome to participate. How would you categorize these on a scale of, let's start with the most difficult. I already told you what I thought was the most difficult, and that is family, taking care of a family member. So we have a child, a stranger, a spouse or partner, an aging parent, terminally ill friend or relative, and a disabled or mentally ill person. I don't know if you have any thoughts about it. Maybe you've only had one experience, or maybe you've talked to someone who has a mentally ill person who may be dependent on drugs or dependent on, or goes back and forth to the hospital because they keep trying to kill themselves. So these are things, these are subjects, and I'm just wondering, have you ever took the time to think, what is the most difficult one? Now, it may be for you, it is the parent, because that's what your reality is at the moment. In my opinion, caring for a loved one is probably the most challenging, because it does require you to become a different person in order to do it effectively. But that's my opinion. I'm sure everyone is different. So it's something to think about, because it does help you in your process. Okay. In order to care well for someone and do it with success, one must first understand the subject or their patient. So just like anything else, if you are a salesperson and you have a product that you have to sell, you better know everything about that product so that you can be very good at selling it. The more you know about the product, the better you can be at selling it, because you can now reach out to anybody because you know what that product can do for them. The same thing here is basically, I want you to look at this in the same way. The subject matter is the person you're caring for, and it's up to you to be effective enough to know who they are, research them, and get to know them so that they can, because that's how you build trust. Who am I caring for? What does this individual need? Now, I know someone who is currently caring for his wife. She has ALS, and I think also Parkinson's. So she has two different things he's dealing with. It started about 5 years ago, and he was told that on the 5th year is going to be where the real challenge is, because that's when she can no longer do anything for herself. It will require him to be everything for her. So we have to think about it from that perspective. If we're caring for a terminally ill patient, or maybe someone who has cancer but not stage 4, and will go into remission, how do we care for them differently than if we do someone that doesn't go into remission and is eventually going to pass? How do we deal with somebody with Alzheimer's? That's a tough one. All people that age will eventually have some sort of memory, or what we call an aging brain. We usually use dementia for that, or standard dementia. But there are some people who have dementia and Alzheimer's, which are two different things. But when they get both, it becomes very, very difficult because you lose that person. And then even though you've spent maybe 20 years building trust with that individual, when they're gone, here, you are dealt with a whole new set of problems because now they don't trust anybody. So there are so many different aspects to the caretaking. But that's where the research comes in. And that's where the questions come. You need to know your subject. So do your research, study the individual, ask questions. Now, explore their story, their history, their family, their culture, their loss. Explore the losses, ask questions about what happened to them when they were younger. Because as they get older, especially parents, they will draw back and go back to where the trauma starts. Because they are going to be experiencing losing control. They are going to be experiencing the loss of the cognitive understanding of things, and they're going to be dependent on you to make those decisions for them. And it's very frustrating. So if they had a trauma as a child, that trauma becomes PTSD for them at this point. A lot of us don't understand that, and all of a sudden our parents is behaving in a way where we don't understand, like, where is this coming from? If you, while they're still here, if you start to ask them questions. Now, it's very hard to do that when you're a child to a parent because you're prying. And if they're coming from the generation of my mother, who is almost 90, they're not going to share that with you. But they will share it with a caregiver. The caregiver becomes the one person that they trust the most. And they even stop looking at you as their child almost, because they need to tell someone. So that's something that we can explore. It's something that every day I learn something new about my mom. It helps that when you start losing your memory, which my mom is, that they repeat themselves over and over. They tell you the same story over. Because if you listen to that same story, you'll get something a little different each time. They'll take you a little further. All of a sudden, like, wait a minute. I've heard this story for the last 3 years. It's always been the same. And then all of a sudden, she put one more detail in there. And so now I get a little bit more information that I can use to help her. You need to know what makes them happy. My mom, for instance, when she's having bad days, and it's usually days where she will never admit to being depressed, but she will admit when she's unhappy, which in a sense is about the same thing. But one is a word that we just don't use, and the other one is just not feeling right. I don't know where it's coming from. My mother's favorite thing is babies. She had 15. And babies have always been the one thing that calmed her. She never had, when she was, I hope she doesn't mind me telling you this, but I'm sure she doesn't. She'll probably watch this later. She never had any difficult births, except for maybe one. She never experienced what women do where they, difficult pregnancies. Her pregnancies were always, she felt wonderful during her pregnancies, but babies were her thing. So I go through social media or whatever, and I collect the little videos that I can find of babies laughing, and then when I find that she's having a bad day, that's what I show her. We go through a whole bunch of YouTube things until her whole mood changes. And she starts to feel that place of happiness, she is beginning to feel it again. Even though she is now, she can't do anything, she feels like she has no purpose anymore. The baby thing brought her back to where she was happy. So it's very important to know what makes a person happy and what makes them sad. Understand their pain. There are times when you lose your memory that you don't remember what to do for pain. One of the things that I get all the time from my mother, oh, my legs hurt so bad. Okay, you know what? Let's do what we did last time. I'll give you a pill and then we'll put some cream on it. I don't ever remember having this pain. So that is not, I learned very quickly not to say that because then it confuses her. What do you mean this happened to me before? And then she realizes that her memory's not working well and she gets anxiety. So I treat it like it's the first time. I said, oh really? It's hurting you? You know what, I've been told that if you take Tylenol, it will really help you. And then all of a sudden it's something, okay, I'll do it. And there's no confusion that adds on to, I don't like myself at the reality that I am in at the moment because I can't remember. So it's very important how you choose words. I learned it the hard way. I actually used to remember getting really angry at my brothers and sisters who came to visit, who didn't know that my mother was slowly losing her memory. And they would say, Mom, you've already told that story, I've heard it before. And she would look at them like, I don't remember telling you this story. So right away they were shutting her out, shutting her down. So I would get really angry at them and say, what's the matter with you? Don't you understand that well, no, they don't understand that because I live with her. They don't. So now I make it I make it a point to write to my family on a weekly basis to let them know where she is every week, how the memory is going. If I go to a doctor's appointment with her and the doctor says, well, we did all the testing that we can do, you don't have Alzheimer's. If you had Alzheimer's, you would fight with me about the fact that your memory's fine. People who have Alzheimer's are not aware that they have a memory issue. That's the first sign. If they argue with you that there's nothing wrong with them and they have memory issues, check them for the Alzheimer's. Now, she's very aware of the fact that she's forgetful. She talks about it. That is just what we call an aging brain. It will happen to all of us. It starts to happen to us after menopause, 50, when we walk into a room and we don't know why we walked in here. We trace our steps. Basically what happens when you are losing the estrogen that you normally have or your hormones are changing, your blood in the brain starts weakening. It doesn't flow the way that it used to. So there are certain parts, just like if you have a tree and everything is green, as the tree ages, all of a sudden you'll notice that there's no leaves on that end. It's not getting enough oxygen. So all of a sudden they're not relating to one another, and where that memory was, it's not connecting. So that's basically what an aging brain is. It will happen to all of us, but differently. That's why when someone says to me, well, you know, my grandmother is 98 years old. She's so sharp, and your mother's only, yeah, but the brain ages differently. So it just means that your hormones may be different. Everyone is different, but that's what happens to the brain. So our duty, and it scares people, think about it. If you ever went, when you were a teenager or when you were a young person, you went drinking with your friends and you drank too much and the next day you couldn't remember how you got home, that would scare you. You would just it would be in your head all the time. Well, the same thing goes for someone who is dealing with losing that memory. And none of us are exempt to it. It is equally harder when you're a caretaker and you are beginning to lose your memory in certain points. Or you are so used to multitasking and all of a sudden, you just can't do it anymore. You've got to really focus on doing one thing at a time. And if you get distracted, it gets hard. But you're caretaking for someone and they want something right away and you got to get to them. And you're thinking, if I leave what I'm doing here, I'm going to forget about this. That's where the flexibility comes in, where you have to just say, let it go. If I don't get to this today, it's okay. But that's where the challenge comes in. So do the research, get to know the person, pry. Pry in a very nice way so that they think that you're interested in them, because you are. You're interested in knowing more about them. Don't be surprised if you end up hearing something that may be very difficult for you, like the fact that maybe your parent was raped and you never knew this because it was a secret, or that they had to give up a child when they were a teen, and they never talked about it again. So you will learn things that may be hard for you. That's why I recommend self-care, having a person you can talk to, a best friend, or having a counselor where you can say things that are very, very difficult to talk about, and you want to keep them secure and safe so that you can deal with this. Because it's very hard to find out that a parent had been accosted. All of a sudden, it will stay with you. It will make you be kinder to that parent. But there's nothing worse from a child knowing that that happened while they were a kid and they couldn't do anything about it. Okay? I know I'm going into some very, very serious details here, but these are things that are important to know. And these are the challenges that a caregiver deals with on a daily basis, especially when it's a family member. Okay, same thing, listen and explore. Always make the subject matter the priority. Even when you have so many things on your mind and you know you have to pay the bills and you know that you're going to have someone coming in to take a look at the plumbing in 5 minutes or so, and that parent needs you, sometimes you just want to say, like with a child, slow down for a minute, I will be with you, and leave me alone for 5 minutes so I can handle this. Unfortunately, you can't do that with an older person. And that's where the frustration comes in. And it's okay to be frustrated. It is okay to lose your cool. That person's not going to remember it forever. You're going to remember it because you don't like what you just did. But it's okay. Forgive yourself and move on. It will happen. It will happen more than once. And there are times when you find that it's happening more often, then you know that's the sign for burnout. That's when you need to call a family member or a friend and say, I need the weekend off. I need to clear my mind. That is self-help. That is what we talk about, caring for yourself so that you could do better with them. I was working here full-time at a very high position with a lot of responsibility. I was going back and forth to Kalamazoo to take care of my sister with cancer and taking care of my mom. And then I would all of a sudden find myself snapping at her. It wasn't her fault, but I was snapping at her and I wasn't giving her, I was cutting corners. And she was getting neglected and I realized I have to do something. I can't stop my sister from what she's going through. I can't stop my mom from what she's going through. I am going to have to quit my job. And it's a job I loved. And it is what kept me going financially. But I had to do it because something was going to fall between the cracks. And I wasn't also functioning here. You can't possibly do your job properly if you're being called to so many different things. So you have to make really hard choices. And sometimes you have to ask for help. I don't have any money coming in. At the time, being that I knew about Medicare and Medicaid, I knew that if I quit, my mother would qualify, because I would no longer be making any money, my mother would qualify for full Medicaid. When a person is qualified for full Medicaid, the government can pay me $3,000 a month to take care of her. Yep, believe it or not, it has to be full Medicaid. So I was like, okay, I can do this. And then we got a new government. They changed the poverty level, and all of a sudden, by $20 to $30, she no longer qualified for full Medicaid, and I couldn't get the money. So what do? How are we going to survive? So that's when I made a call to the brothers and sisters and said, we have two choices. We can put her in a home, and it's going to cost us $6,000 a month, and she's not going to be happy. Or you can pay me for my monthly expenses so that I can keep on going. Among all of us, we'll just split it. And that worked. That worked because each person gives $50, $100.
There's so many of you.
There's so many. You can't always do that.
Right.
That's true. But I didn't ask him to pay me to take care of her. I said, just pay for my car payment so we have a car. Pay for this, pay for that. And they did that. So it just so happens that it worked for me. It will not always work for everybody. And it's very hard to be dependent. When you're independent,
Right.
It's hard to be dependent on family and people. So But sometimes, like I said, you have to explore everything. You have to listen to hear what's going on out there. If you want to know what kind of programs are out there from the government to help you, go to a senior center. Ask them what's out there. Go to the area agency on aging. They will help you. They know more than anybody else. How are we doing on time? Okay. Relationship to the person is key. Are we family? Are we a spouse? Are we strangers? Each requires a different set of skills. We talked a little bit here about all those different skills, but it's very hard when you have no medical background to deal with someone that all of a sudden now has to take pills, has to take shots, may even have chemotherapy, so you have to clean a wound. It just, everything is different. There is training, and I would recommend that whatever you do, explore those trainings, explore how you can get help to make your life easier so it makes it, and maybe you're not the type of person that wants to take care of an open wound. By all means, find out what the hospital can do. Remember, you are always the caregiver from this point on. You're the confidant, you're their secret keeper, you're the most trusted individual in this person's life, and they'll treat you that way. So when you have family members and your parent comes to you when they're really, let's say that they're giving you a really hard time and they only do it to you but nobody else, they will also, in some families, some brothers and sisters will look at it as if, why are you, why is she closer to you and not me? You may find out that in their will, they'll leave you more than they would the other brothers and sisters because you cared for them. And they know that you, even though they gave you such a hard time, they knew that you sacrificed. These little things on the outside will come to mess with you. What I want you to remember is what your duty is. Never forget that that's what you are to them. It doesn't matter what the family thinks. It doesn't matter what the outside world thinks. You were entrusted with the biggest trust. You're the one person that they trust, probably more than God, because God is over here for them right now, and you're right there. So it's important that you remember that. And don't let the outside world change how you feel about what you're, don't let that change you. Own up to it. Always make them first priority. You're their advocate. Don't worry about being shy if you're in the hospital and you feel like someone's not being treated properly. Speak out. It's a lot easier to speak out for somebody else than it is for you. Shout if you have to. Make sure that they're cared for and that they see that someone is taking care of them. You work for them, not for your family. So what they need is your first priority, not what your brother thinks that you should do. You are now their lifeline to the rest of the world. So it really is up to you. And that's a responsibility that makes it very challenging because you're fighting against so many different things in the real world, but you know that for them, you're their feeding tube. So it does put a lot of stress on a person who's a caregiver. Don't forget, when it gets too much and you're feeling overwhelmed, call that person and say, can you just come for 3 hours? I just want to go have lunch with a friend. And even though the parent may say, I don't want you to leave, leave. Say, I'm doing it for you, Mom. Question, what kind of skills must one develop or need to become a successful caregiver? Just need to be human. You need to be accepting to the fact that you will make mistakes and that you're not perfect. And the fact that you even show up in the morning is enough. There are many people who don't even show up. So the fact that you show up should be good enough. Compassion is a really good one. Being able to tune in to the other person's distress and feeling the desire to alleviate that distress. That's being human. Understanding the enormous loss that that person is going through. Most people go through a spouse. They lose a spouse, and then everything falls apart, and they need to be taken care of, especially a parent. Physical limitations. As you age, your physical limitations are going to start deteriorating. Your hearing. Someone who can't hear is really, we have one right here. It is hard to do anything when you can't hear. It also affects your memory. Your eyesight is going to change. You may need cataracts, or you may actually become blind in some cases. Your agility, it's not the same. You can't do things. You think you can do things the same way. You remember how to cook, and you go to cook, and then all of a sudden it just, things fall. Your memory, you forget things on the, yeah. So, dexterity. You used to do wonderful things with your hands. You used to do needlepoint. It's what gave you, it's what you were good at. You were an artist. Now you can't do it anymore. All these things are a loss. Every time you have to give up one of these, that person's going through a huge loss. Strength. You no longer have the strength to get up. If you fall, you can't get up on your own because you don't have the strength in your arms. Even though you're doing exercises, you may not have the strength to get up. Mobility. Mobility also has to do with driving. Mobility this way, you may have to have help with walking, but also your keys are taken away. You can no longer drive. That is horrible, especially for men. It is something that they are so used to doing, and it's their only freedom. It's what makes them human, and that's been taken away. Memory, incontinence, there is nothing more scary than going into public. That's another reason why people don't want to go in public anymore, is because they have to wear diapers. And even when they're wearing the undergarment, they are worried it's going to leak. So they may become all of a sudden hermits. And by becoming hermits in the home, you can, you want to get out. Let them sit on the porch. At least they're getting out in their head. Let them sit on the porch. Put them in a car and drive them around. Okay? Because they need stimulation. They may lose their home because they can no longer take care of the home. It's too big. It has stairs. They can't use stairs. And they may have to go into an assisted living or move in with one of their family members that all of a sudden has grandchildren living with them, and it's just chaotic for them. They lose total control of everything. That can really put someone in a deterioration situation, and it makes it a lot harder for the caregiver. They lose focus, and they lose a lot of friends. My mother is the only one left from her family from that generation. And she has no more friends left. All of them have passed. Communication. Caregivers must excel at communication skills, both written and verbal. The verbal, written is primarily more, not so much for the person you're caring for, but to make sure that if you're advocating, that you are the person that is, in the hospitals and stuff, that you can write to the doctor. You become their means of communication with the outside world, family, doctors, institutions, etc. Observation. Be on the lookout for what the individual cannot express. Walk around after they go to the bathroom, go in. See if they're taking showers. It may be that they can no longer stand in the shower. Make sure that they have something so that they're not falling. A lot of kids say to me, a lot of children of elderly parents say to me, it really bothers me that my parent won't take a shower. There's a fear of falling. Also, the idea of doing two things at once is not possible. But there's bathing. They can't get into the bathtub. There's dry bathing. What do you think they do in the hospital when there's a patient? They bathe them. You can teach a person how to still stay clean, but they don't have to take any chances. So that's not unusual, someone that doesn't take a shower for 3 weeks. They are bathing. They're still cleaning themselves. The hygiene is still there, and they still care. So if they can't do it themselves, it's really up to us to help them, because that's important to them. Just because they can't do it and they won't do it does not mean they're lazy, and does not mean that they don't want to be clean. You're their noses. Okay? You're the one. And my mother will always say to me, hell, when I had a boyfriend, I would always say, let me know if my breath stinks because I can't smell my own. So you're there for them. You have to be that person that makes them, when they go into public, feel that they are okay to go into public. Interpersonal skills, be social. Not all of us are social, and some of us, as we age, we have anxieties in social. But you need to be social with the person that you're caring for. You can't just sit there in your phone while they're sitting there doing nothing, because they take it personally. Establish rapport, build trust, and advocate and navigate for them. They are not going to know where to go to get things. They forget how to do things. So you're their navigator now. Time management and organization. Be responsible for the daily schedules and routines, because as you age, you lose track of time. As we said, I thought this was next week. I completely lost track of time. So we need to help with their routines. We need to write their list down and remind them what they need to do. You may have to remind them over and over on a daily basis. My thing is, one of the girls here, Joanne, made me something for my birthday, which is like an erasable, and I have it on the refrigerator all the time, and I write down if we took our pills, when she took this pill, and that way she can see it, not just me. Be on top of the medications. They will not remember to take their medications. And even if they're really good at it, keep an eye on it just in case all of a sudden overnight they stop. Know their environment. Make sure that everything is in place for them. Cleanliness. Make sure the house is clean. Organize the laundry. Make sure it's done. Dishes washed, because if you have chaos, it's hard for them to function. If everything feels the same way that they used to do it when they could do it, they will feel safer. Patience. Patience is hard. But the best way to stay patient is to basically, for them to be patient, keep calm. Remain collected at all times. You can go into the car and scream later when she's gone to bed, because the whole day was just so nerve-wracking. But for them, in front of them, please, please keep calm. Even when something spills, if they burn themselves, if something happens, if they have an accident, it's okay. We can handle this. You would do it for your child, do it for your parents or for your spouse. Flexibility is when you realize that if you are a control freak like I was before I started taking care of people, you learn that, okay, sorry, I forgot about this yesterday. Let me find another way to do this. I can't type it. Let me handwrite it. And I'm going to have a lot of mistakes in there because I don't have spell check, but they're going to have to forgive me. It's not that important. You have to remember what's important and what's not. Creativity, find ways to stimulate and give purpose to your subject. Keep them engaged in life. They may not want to come to the senior center to play cards. Get them in a car and drive them around, show them the foliage. They need to stay engaged. Play cards with them. I tell you, I have never played so many cards in my life. And I wouldn't even play cards here when they asked me to. But the one-on-one keeps them stimulated. Physical strength and stamina. That is more for you than it is for them. It requires a tremendous amount of physical strength to be a caregiver. You are running around all the time. You forget to eat. You forget to do things. If they fall, you need to lift them up. You have got to keep up your physical strength and your mental strength. In summation, if you do it with love, you cannot do it wrong. Even if you don't give them everything they need, it doesn't matter, as long as you do it with care and humanity and love. Remember, God's in control. Ask him for help, because you are not in control over this. You are not in control. The parent is not in control. The only thing you have is you care about them. So you can help, but ask for help. Last one. What is the sign that you are a good caregiver? Anybody know? Anybody think that you know the sign? There is one. There's a really, really good sign. And you may not know what it is because you think it's the negative part. A good sign of a good caregiver, you will always have doubts that you haven't done enough. You will go to bed at night and you'll say, why didn't I do it this way? Why did I not? She told me and I didn't hear it. I should have done it this way. Monday morning quarterbacking. Constantly questioning yourself. When they pass away, you spend 2 years wondering, why did I not do this? I regret not giving him more of this. I regret not saying this to her. I have doubts that I didn't do enough. That is a good caregiver. You will always, always have doubts that you have not done enough. That should be the sign that you were really good at what you did. Just remember that. Now, I'm done. I went a little bit too far. But if you have any questions or if you have something you want to share, we're going to turn that off. You can cough.
I was just about ready to go outside because I was fixing to cough.
Thank you so much, Monroe. Wonderful.
There is no right way to do this. There is no right way. It changes all the time. And like I said, if you're doubting yourself, you're doing something right because you care. That's just all there is to it. Okay?
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the video, and that way you can ask some private, intimate questions. But thank
You
you
just
all
need to
for
share.
coming. We do appreciate everybody. Thank you.